Captain Zorb 6 clicked his mandibles together in what his species considered pure amusement. The human specimen before him looked absolutely pathetic, really. Gray hair sprouting from his scalp like dying weeds, wrinkled skin that reminded Zorb of ancient leather, and those ridiculous bipedal legs that could barely support his frail frame. The old creature sat hunched in the biocontainment field, looking about as threatening as a deflated air sac. Well, Zorb chittered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vash 9. Look what our hunting party dragged back from that backwater planet. Earth, wasn't it? Vash 9's purple carapace gleamed under the ship's bioluminescent strips. Yes, Captain. Third planet from their yellow star. Primitive civilization barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 cycles ago. This one was found hiding in some underground bunker. The human raised his head slowly, and Zorb noticed something peculiar in those small, round eyes. Not fear exactly, not desperation either. Something else entirely. Hiding. The human's voice cracked with age, but carried an odd tone that made Zorb's antenna twitch. Son, it wasn't hiding. I was waiting. Zorb burst into chittering laughter, his 6 legs dancing with mirth. Waiting? Oh, that's rich. Waiting for what, exactly? Your inevitable death. The human leaned back against the containment field's edge and somehow managed to look comfortable despite being held prisoner by beings who just glassed half his planet. Waiting for you knuckleheads to finally show up. Vash 9's compound eyes widened. Did it just insult us? I think it did, Zorb said, genuinely delighted. Most species begged for mercy by now. The Calarians had wept green tears. The Morphians had tried bribing them with precious metals. The Zentari had simply curled up and died from shock. But this ancient human was sitting there like he owned the place. What's your designation, creature? Zorb demanded. Name's Garrett Mills. Retired Colonel, Terran Defense Force. Though I suppose that doesn't mean much now that you have turned most of my planet into glass, does it? The casualness in the human's voice was starting to unnerve Zorb, though he'd never admit it. Your planet put up quite the fight, I will give you that. Your space fleet was adequate. For primitives, Garrett Mills actually chuckled. Fleet? Oh, you sweet, naive little bug. That wasn't our fleet. Zorb's mandibles stopped clicking. Excuse me, that was our Coast Guard. The silence that followed was so complete that Zorb could hear the ship's recycling systems humming 3 decks below. Vash 9's antenna drooped visibly. Your Coast Guard, Vash 9 whispered. Yep, harbor patrol, mostly. Search and rescue boats with some missile tubes slapped on. The real Navy. Garrett Mills grinned, and Zorb noticed the human had kept most of his teeth despite his advanced age. Well, they're a bit busy at the moment. Zorb felt something cold settle in his stomach cavity. Busy with what? Oh, glassing your homeworld. The temperature in the detention bay seemed to drop several degrees. Zorb's legs locked into place, and he found himself staring at this impossible old human who'd just delivered the most absurd statement he'd ever heard. That's impossible, Vash 9 stammered. Our homeworld has orbital defense platforms, quantum shields, a battle fleet of over 3,000 vessels. Garrett Mills nodded thoughtfully. Past tense there, friend. Zorb's communication implant suddenly burst to life with panicked chatter from across their fleet. Reports of human ships appearing out of nowhere. Massive vessels that dwarfed even their dreadnoughts. Weapons that cut through their shielding like it was tissue paper. No, this can't be happening. See, that's the thing about humans. Garrett continued conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather instead of interstellar warfare. We are pack hunters. Always have been. You attack one of us, you attack all of us. And we don't just defend ourselves. The old man's eyes hardened, and suddenly Zorb understood what he'd been seeing in them. Not fear, not desperation, anticipation. We hunt back. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Zorb's communication implant was now screaming with reports of human fleets emerging from something called slip space around every major Kellogg system. Planets under siege. Space stations burning. How? Zorb demanded. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Garrett Mills stood up slowly his old joints creaking audibly. The containment field flickered and died, though neither Zorb nor Vash 9 had touched the controls. Behind, the human laughed, and it was the most terrifying sound Zorb had ever heard. Son, we have been watching you bugs hop from system to system for the last 200 years. Did you really think we were just sitting on our little blue marble, picking our noses? The ship shuddered as something massive struck it. Emergency lighting bathed the detention bay in red, making the human's weathered face look demonic. We let you think you were the predators, Garrett continued, walking toward them with surprising steadiness for someone his age. We let you believe you were at the top of the food chain. We even let you glass half of Earth, just to see what weapons you'd use. Another impact. This time, the artificial gravity fluctuated, and Zorb had to grip the bulkhead to keep from floating away. You want to know the real kicker? Garrett asked, now standing directly in front of Zorb's trembling form. Earth? That was just our farming colony. Pretty little place to grow food and raise children. Our actual military bases are hidden in asteroid fields and rogue planets you have never even detected. Vash 9 made a choking sound. Farming colony? Oh yes, we've got about 30,000 worlds now. Most of them you have never seen because we build deep and hide well. Learned that from you, actually. Thanks for the lesson. The ship's hull began to groan ominously. Through the detention bay's reinforced window, Zorb could see the twisted wreckage of his escort vessels drifting past, and beyond them, barely visible against the star field, loomed shapes so massive they defied comprehension. What are you? Zorb whispered. Garrett Mills smiled, and it was worse than his laugh. We are humans, Captain. We are the species that turned warfare into an art form before we even left our home system. We're the ones who look at the food chain and decided we belonged at the very top. Another impact, stronger this time. The lights went out completely, leaving only the emergency strips casting everything in hellish red. You think you're predators because you hunt other species for sport. That's cute. Really. Garrett's voice seemed to echo in the darkness. But you hunt for fun. We hunt for survival. We hunt to protect our young. We hunt because it's written into our genetic code. Sparks cascaded from a damaged control panel, illuminating Garrett's face in brief, terrifying flashes. And right now, old man, the human continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. Right now, we are hunting you. The ship lurched violently to one side. Zorb heard the distinctive whine of boarding pods attaching to the hull. In the distance, the sound of cutting tools began to echo through the corridors. They're coming for me, aren't they? Zorb asked, his voice barely a whisper. Garrett Mills tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. Actually, no. They are not coming for you at all. Confusion joined the terror in Zorb's compound eyes. Then what they are coming for me, Garrett said simply. See, I'm not just any retired colonel. I am Garrett Mills. Does that name mean anything to you? It did. Oh, by the void, it did. Even Zorb, whose knowledge of human culture was limited to military intelligence reports, knew that name. The Butcher of Europa Station. The ghost of the Titan Nebula. The human who'd single-handedly destroyed an entire pirate fleet using nothing but mining equipment and pure, concentrated fury. But you were reported dead, Vash 9 squeaked. 20 years ago. Ship explosion near the Centauri system. Garrett chuckled again. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Truth is, I retired to that little farm on Earth. Wanted to grow tomatoes and watch sunsets. Peaceful life for an old soldier. The cutting sound were getting closer. Zorb could hear human voices now, speaking in their harsh, angular language. But you couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Garrett's voice hardened. Had to come to my home. Had to threaten my neighbors. Had to wake up the old dog. The bulkhead behind them began to glow cherry red as human cutting torches worked their way through the reinforced metal. So let me explain something to you. Captain Zorb 6 of the Kellogg's hegemony. Garrett stepped closer, and Zorb could smell something on the human's breath. Something metallic and dangerous. You are not predators. You are scavengers. You pick on weak species and call it hunting. The glowing section of bulkhead suddenly exploded inward, showering the detention bay with molten metal. Through the breach came figures in powered armor, their movements precise and lethal. Human soldiers, but not like any Zorb had seen in the intelligence reports. These were bigger, faster, and carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. We, on the other hand, Garrett continued, seemingly oblivious to the armed humans now filling the room. We are apex predators. We don't just hunt prey. We hunt other predators. One of the armored figures stepped forward and removed their helmet, revealing the face of a middle-aged human woman with steel gray eyes and scars across her left cheek. "Hello, grandfather," she said, her voice carrying the same underlying menace as Garrett's. "We have come to take you home." Garrett Mills smiled and embraced the woman. "Hello, Rebecca. I trust the family business is going well." "Very well. The Kellogg's homeworld surrendered an hour ago. The rest of their fleet is either destroyed or fleeing to the outer rim." Zorb felt his legs give out beneath him. The entire Kellogg's hegemony, rulers of 47 star systems, defeated in a matter of hours by a species they dismissed as primitive. "What about the survivors?" Garrett asked. That Rebecca's smile was cold as space itself. "We are giving them the same choice we gave the Karnak Empire and the Vorthan Collective. Surrender completely and accept human oversight of their government, or face complete extinction. And they chose. They chose wisely." Garrett nodded approvingly. "Good. I was getting tired of all this senseless killing. Makes me feel young again, but hell, I'm too old for this level of excitement." He turned back to Zorb, who was now cowering on the deck plates like the prey animal he'd always truly been. "This is how it worked from now on, Captain. Humanity is no longer hiding. We are done pretending to be weak. Any species that threatens human colonies, human trade routes, or human citizens will face the same fate as your people." Zorb tried to speak, but only managed a weak, chittering sound. "Oh, don't worry," Garrett said with mock kindness. "We are not going to kill you. That would be wasteful. Instead, you're going to live a long, healthy life in comfortable captivity while we study your species' biology and psychology. Think of it as retirement." The human soldiers were already attaching restraint devices to Zorb and Vash-9, advanced technology that made their own containment fields look like children's toys. "You see," Garrett continued, "we learned something important from studying you and the other predator species we have encountered. You all make the same mistake. You assume that being aggressive makes you dangerous." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But humans? We don't just do aggression. We do patient, calculated, methodical extermination of anything that threatens our pack. We plan for decades. We wait for the perfect moment, and then we strike with overwhelming force." The last thing Zorb heard before the neural dampener activated was Garrett Mills' voice, growing distant as consciousness faded. "Welcome to the bottom of the food chain." 3 months later, Zorb 6 found himself in what humans called a research facility, though it looked more like a luxury prison to him. The walls were a pleasant shade of blue, the artificial gravity was perfectly calibrated for his species, and the food dispensers provided meals that were actually quite palatable. It would have been almost comfortable if not for the constant, gnawing knowledge that he was now a specimen. Doctor. Amanda Cross entered his cell with her usual clipboard and that infuriatingly calm smile. She was younger than Garrett Mills, maybe 40 standard cycles, with dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail. Her eyes held the same predatory intelligence that seemed common among her species, but wrapped in a veneer of scientific curiosity. "Good morning, Zorb," she said pleasantly, settling into the chair across from his resting platform. "How are you feeling today?" Zorb's mandibles clicked irritably, like a laboratory animal, which I suppose is exactly what I am now. Dr. Cross made a note on her electronic pad. "Actually, you're more like a cultural ambassador. Your insights into Kellogg's society have been invaluable for our integration protocols." "Integration?" Zorb spat. "You mean conquest?" "Not at all." Dr. Cross looked genuinely surprised. "We're not conquerors, Zorb. We are managers. There's a significant difference." Through the transparent aluminum window of his cell, Zorb could see the sprawling complex that housed thousands of former predator species. Kellogg's like himself, the reptilian Varnak who tried to enslave the mining colonies of Proxima, the insectoid Threx who'd been raiding human shipping lanes for decades. All of them now living in comfortable captivity while humanity studied their weaknesses. Managers, Zorb repeated flatly. Is that what you call systematic elimination of entire military hierarchies? Dr. Cross shrugged. We prefer our structuring. Your species' governments were fundamentally flawed. Too much emphasis on dominance through violence. Not enough on sustainable resource allocation and long-term planning. A soft chime indicated that Zorb had a visitor. The cell's security field shimmered and admitted someone he hadn't expected to see again. Garrett Mills. The old human looked even more relaxed than before, wearing simple civilian clothes and carrying what appeared to be a cup of some hot beverage. Mind if I join you, Doc? Garrett asked the doctor. Cross smiled and gestured to another chair. Of course, Colonel. Zorb was just asking about our management philosophy. Garrett settled into his chair with a soft grunt. The eternal question. Are we the good guys or the bad guys? He took a sip from his cup and sighed contentedly. Coffee. One of humanity's greatest achievements, if you ask me. Zorb studied the old human carefully. You seem remarkably cheerful for someone who just orchestrated the subjugation of half the galaxy. Subjugation? Garrett raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting word choice. Tell me, Zorb, how many Kellogg's civilians died during our takeover of your homeworld? The question caught Zorb off guard. What do you mean? Simple question. Military casualties. I understand there were significant losses. But civilians, non-combatants, how many died? Zorb's compound eyes narrowed as he thought back to the reports he'd received before being captured. The human assault had been devastatingly precise, targeting only military installations and government buildings. The civilian population centers had been left completely untouched. None, he admitted reluctantly. But that doesn't change the fact that you have destroyed our way of life. Garrett nodded thoughtfully. Your way of life, yes, but not your lives. That's the key difference between us and you, Zorb. When your people conquered the Miran system, what happened to the civilian population? Zorb's mandibles clamped shut. He knew exactly what had happened to the Mirans. His own ship had participated in the orbital bombardment that had reduced their cities to rubble. The Mirans were weak, he said finally. They couldn't adapt. They were farmers, Dr. Cross interjected, her voice still pleasant, but with an edge of steel. Peaceful agriculturalists who'd never developed military technology because they'd never needed it. Your people killed them for sport. Garrett leaned forward in his chair. That's the fundamental difference between a predator and an apex predator, Zorb. Predators kill for food, territory, or dominance. Apex predators kill to protect their pack and maintain the balance of their ecosystem. And what ecosystem are you protecting exactly? Zorb demanded. The galaxy, Garrett said simply. Every species we have encountered falls into one of three categories. Prey species, who develop technology and culture, but lack the aggression to defend themselves. Predator species, like yours, who use their advantages to terrorize weaker civilizations. And apex predators. He stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the research complex beyond. For the past 3 centuries, the predator species have been running wild, destroying civilizations that took millennia to develop. The Kellogg's alone wiped out 14 different species in the last 50 years. The Threx eliminated 9. The Varnak made slavery an art form. Dr. Cross pulled up a holographic display showing galactic population statistics. In the time since humanity began what we call the Stabilization Project, galactic biodiversity has increased by 43%. Extinct languages are being reconstructed. Lost technologies are being recovered and redistributed. Zorb stared at the data, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. You're saying you're saving the galaxy by conquering it. We are saying we are managing it, Garrett corrected. Think of it as ecosystem maintenance on a galactic scale. Predators serve an important function, but when they become overpopulated or too aggressive, they need to be culled. Cull. The word sent a chill through Zorb's exoskeleton. Garrett returned to his chair, his expression becoming more serious. Don't misunderstand me, Zorb. We don't enjoy this. Most humans would prefer to stay on their garden worlds, raising families and pursuing peaceful endeavors. But someone has to maintain the balance. And you appointed yourselves? Evolution appointed us, Dr. Cross said matter-of-factly. We developed the right combination of intelligence, aggression, and pack loyalty to serve as galactic apex predators. Just like wolves serve that function in terrestrial ecosystems. A new alarm chimed, different from the visitor notification. Dr. Cross checked her tablet and frowned. We have another situation developing. The Corvin Syndicate has declared war on the human colonies in the outer spiral. Garrett sighed and finished his coffee. The Corvins. Didn't we send them a warning last year? 3 warnings, actually. They've been testing our response times and defensive capabilities. Intelligence suggests they believe our forces are spread too thin to respond effectively to a coordinated assault. Zorb felt a familiar chill. He'd heard about the Corvin Syndicate. They were even more ruthless than the Kelloggs, with a military doctrine based on complete annihilation of enemy populations. "What will you do?" he asked. Garrett stood up slowly, and Zorb saw something shift in the old human's demeanor. The grandfatherly warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. The same thing we always do when a predator species refuses to accept the new order. His voice carried the same menacing undertone that had terrified Zorb months ago. We will remind them why humanity sits at the top of the food chain. Dr. Cross was already receiving updates on her tablet. Fleet Command is requesting your presence, Colonel. They want you to oversee the Corvin response personally. Of course they do. Garrett smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The old man comes out of retirement one more time. He turned to Zorb. Would you like to observe, Captain? Consider it part of your education in apex predator behavior. Zorb found himself nodding despite his better judgment. Part of him was terrified to witness another demonstration of human military might, but a larger part was morbidly curious to see how they would handle a threat as dangerous as the Corvins. 2 hours later, Zorb found himself in the observation deck of a human command ship, watching as the largest military fleet he'd ever seen assembled in the void around them. Massive dreadnoughts that stretched for kilometers, surrounded by clouds of smaller vessels that moved with predatory grace through the darkness. Admiral Patricia Hayes, a stern-faced woman with silver hair and cybernetic implants along her left temple, stood at the central command console. Colonel Mills, we have 147 capital ships ready for deployment. The Corvin fleet is estimated at 300 vessels, but they are spread across 12 systems. Garrett nodded approvingly. Classic mistake. They are thinking like predators, trying to maximize their territorial control. What's our response time to the furthest target? 17 minutes via slipspace jump. Perfect. Admiral, I want simultaneous strikes on all 12 systems. Complete military neutralization, 0 civilian casualties. Make it clean, make it fast, and make it absolute. Zorb watched in fascination as the human fleet began to organize itself with mechanical precision. Ships disappeared into slipspace portals, their destinations calculated to arrive at their targets within seconds of each other across multiple star systems. Aren't you concerned about the numbers disadvantage? Zorb asked. Admiral Hayes overheard and smiled coldly. The Corvins are still thinking in terms of ship-to-ship combat. They don't understand that we stopped playing that game decades ago. On the main display, tactical readouts showed the human fleet emerging from slipspace around Corvin military installations. But instead of engaging in traditional combat, the human ships began deploying something Zorb had never seen before. Nanite swarms, Dr. Cross explained, having joined them on the observation deck. Self-replicating machines that can disassemble enemy vessels at the molecular level. They ignore civilian ships and structures, but military hardware. She shrugged. Well, you will see. The Corvin response was immediate and violent. Their ships opened fire with everything they had, filling space with energy beams and kinetic projectiles. For a moment, it looked like they might actually inflict some damage on the human fleet. Then the nanite swarms reached the first Corvin vessels. Zorb watched in horrified fascination as the massive Corvin dreadnoughts simply dissolved. Their hulls broke apart at the atomic level, their weapons systems deconstructed piece by piece, their crews left floating in spacesuits that the nanites carefully avoided damaging. Biological matter is off-limits to the nanites, Garrett explained casually. We're not monsters, after all. The Corvin crews will be picked up by our rescue ships and processed for integration into our research programs. Within 20 minutes, the entire Corvin military force had been neutralized across 12 star systems simultaneously. 300 warships reduced to component atoms, their crews captured alive, their threat to galactic stability permanently eliminated. And that, Admiral Hayes announced to her bridge crew, is how apex predators deal with troublesome pack rivals. Zorb slumped against the observation window, his legs barely able to support him. How many species have you done this to? 47 predator species eliminated as military threats, Dr. Cross replied, consulting her tablet. Another 63 currently under observation and management. The rest of the galaxy's civilizations have been classified as either protected or allied, depending on their development level and cultural stability. You have conquered the entire galaxy, Zorb whispered. We have stabilized it, Garrett corrected. Big difference. Under the old system, species like yours would eventually wipe out 90% of galactic civilization. Under our management, every species gets to survive and develop according to their natural potential. Except for the predator species. Garrett's expression softened slightly. Even the predator species survive, Zorb. They just don't get to hunt anymore. Your people are learning new skills, developing peaceful technologies, contributing to galactic civilization instead of destroying it. Some of them are even thriving under the new system. Admiral Hayes approached their group, removing her command headset. All Corvin systems secured, Colonel. 0 civilian casualties, minimal infrastructure damage. We should have their leadership ready for processing within the next 48 hours. Excellent work, Admiral. Any word from the Galactic Council? They are expressing their gratitude for removing another threat to interstellar peace. The Andromedan Trade Federation is particularly pleased, since the Corvins have been raiding their shipping routes for the past decade. Zorb looked out at the stars, trying to process everything he'd witnessed. Humanity had indeed become the apex predator of the galaxy, but not in the way he'd originally understood the term. They weren't just the most dangerous hunters. They were ecosystem managers on a scale that boggled the mind. What happens now? He asked quietly. Garrett put a surprisingly gentle hand on Zorb's carapace. Now you go back to your comfortable cell, continue working with Dr. Cross on cultural integration protocols, and help us figure out how to transform your people from predators into productive members of galactic society. And if we refuse? The old human's expression didn't change, but Zorb felt the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. Zorb, Garrett said softly, in the entire history of our species, we have never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with the right application of overwhelming force and careful planning. The Corvins thought they were different too. As they returned to the research facility, Zorb found himself contemplating the strange reality of his new existence. Humanity had indeed proven themselves to be apex predators, but not through simple violence or dominance. They'd done it through intelligence, coordination, and an almost incomprehensible level of strategic thinking. They were predators who hunted other predators, pack hunters who protected the weak and eliminated threats to galactic stability. They were, he realized with a mixture of terror and grudging admiration, exactly what the galaxy had needed all along. The old human had been right from the beginning. They weren't just predators, they were apex predators, and now the entire galaxy lived under their protection.